Welcome. Can everybody hear me okay? I'm Professor Sterling Bone, Professor of Marketing here at the John M. Huntsman School of Business, and I welcome all of our students and faculty and friends of Huntsman School here for this leadership forum. We're fortunate to have the co-founder of Qualtrics, Stuart Orgill, who's joined us here. Let's give Stuart a warm welcome. Stuart, it's great to have you here, and we appreciate your time, and I know our students are really anxious to visit with you about the incredible story as Qualtrics. But a little bit of background on Stuart. Stuart graduated from the Marriott School of Management at Brigham Young University with a degree in accounting. He comes from a rich entrepreneurial family, and I say rich and lots of experience, lots of opportunity growing up with entrepreneurial parents, and had an opportunity to intern at PricewaterhouseCoopers, and he'll talk a little bit about that experience and his desire to be in a startup environment. In 2002, Qualtrics was founded, and many of you probably know the story. It was founded in the basement of a professor at Brigham Young University, Scott Smith, and together with his sons, Ryan and Jared, Stewart was part of that initial team that led out the growth of a company that now is one of the rising stars in the tech space, is valuated upwards to $1.3 billion, and is right here in our beautiful Silicon Slopes. And so I'd like to, maybe ask Stuart right at the onset. Tell the students a little bit about your background, kind of how you learned about leadership in your early years, and how that leadership has kind of informed your role today at Qualtrics.
I think when I was a kid, I hated working at my dad's business. He had a swimming pool service company. He had about 2,000 clients, but it was like punishment to work there. I mean, every single Saturday we'd have to go out, and my brother and I he'd have some project for us to do, and in the summers he would always send us out on routes, and it was a great experience. I didn't realize it then, but just learning how to work really hard, I think, is helpful to any leader. And then also, as you work hard, it helps you develop a sense of what you want to do. Because if you're doing something that's really hard and you hate it, you don't want to do that, right? And I think that was as big of a piece of the puzzle, going forward and learning about what I wanted to do and the type of, career I wanted to have later on.
Very good. Now, speak to a little bit about the early days of Qualtrics. I know a lot of the students are familiar with Qualtrics. By a raise of hands among the students, how many have used Qualtrics or have taken a Qualtrics survey? So maybe talk about the early days of Qualtrics. Maybe tell a little bit about the story and what your involvement and role was in those early days of Qualtrics.
So throughout school, I always wanted to do something entrepreneurial. I knew that. And back then it wasn't very cool to do something entrepreneurial. It was right after the dot-com bust, right? And so I don't think people were as interested in doing it. And I didn't I didn't major in, I didn't pick, the entrepreneurial major. I actually was an accounting major. But I was always doing something entrepreneurial on the side. And in the early days in Qualtrics, it was an unfinished basement. It was nothing spectacular, but we could both tell that there was a lot of opportunity, Ryan and I. And we both kind of had our foot in college. We were still doing that. We were still kind of testing it out. We were trying to figure out what direction we were going to go after we graduated, but we were doing this in the meantime. And I think Ryan was doing it because he wanted to work with his dad, and he felt like there was some money in it. It was a decent job. He was kind of like a sales guy. I was doing it because I always wanted to have an entrepreneurial project that kept my mind fresh. My long-term goal was to do something entrepreneurial. I knew I was going to do that, and so this was just kind of something to keep it fresh, and it was a lot of fun because his dad would allow us to kind of play business in a basement, and we were selling licenses, and we were supporting customers and doing everything that you need in order to grow a business, and we were having to bootstrap everything. So, if we didn't make money, we didn't get paid.
Very good. And you talk about that environment and being in that early startup. What were some of the hardest challenges you had to overcome in that basement environment? What were some of the hard knocks that you had to learn to shape you and help you shape as a leader?
In a startup, if you don't have funding, you just don't have all the resources that you want. And so you have to go out and do it on your own. And if you're going to get anything done, you have to make it happen. And that also means that the process is going to be a little bit slower, but at the same time, I think it turns the business into a really good business. And it also allows kind of the customers and everyone else that does place a bet on you to really kind of see the personality of the people there, and there's like that spark of, why you care. It's a real company. It creates kind of an authentic product. And I think that's kind of the biggest challenge, though. If you're bootstrapping something and if you're in a basement, there's going to be hard days, and you're going to have to figure things out. And I think it's a lot like a career or life or anything. Part of that journey helps you crystallize your direction and helps you figure out what you are good at and what people are going to use your product for, and kind of move in that direction.
So going through this journey to the point where I read that Qualtrics received some significant funding from Sequoia, but wasn't necessarily looking for funding. Why did Qualtrics take that funding initially from Sequoia, and what has that meant to have funding in terms of growing Qualtrics?
So we didn't take funding because Scott had been involved in another business before Qualtrics. He had done this. He'd built software over and over again, and just sold it kind of on the side. And this time Ryan was working with him, and I came on board, and I started trying to grow it. But Scott was always against funding because he had seen the negative side of funding. A lot of money comes in, people spend money on buildings, people spend money on marketing and like all the flashy stuff, and then the product doesn't ever go anywhere, and it didn't really help the business. So he was pretty against it. I think there's something like there's like a sense of pride to say we're not for sale, and to have people come to you and just say we're not for sale, we're not interested. And we used to do that all the time, and people would email us, people would call in, and we always had these calls, and there's saying, hey, we can give you funding. And we'd built a business that was bringing in a lot of cash. It was had profit margins north of 60%, and it was doubling every year. And we were living a great life, Ryan and I were, and it was super fun, and it was just like there is a sense of pride to say we don't need your money, And at a certain point, kind of in the history, Ryan was actually golfing with a friend, and he said, you know what? That's fine. You can just turn everyone down. That's okay. But there might come a point in time when you do want funding, or when you do want investment capital, or you do want capital, or partners, and that's probably the wrong time to go out and build those relationships. And as we continued to grow it, we were doing well within the United States. We'd built like a 100-person inside sales team at Qualtrics, really almost prior to the funding. And it was going well, but we knew that the next step was to go into Europe and to go into some of these other places. It was a very flat organization. There wasn't anyone in HR. There wasn't anyone that wasn't client focused in the entire company. Everyone was dealing with clients, whether you were on the product side or the sales side. Everyone was dealing with clients, and so we didn't have a lot of internal issues. There weren't any politics. It was a team that was just running as fast as they possibly could, and it was super exciting. But you kind of have to look at the opportunities that you're given, and you have to decide what's like the best outcome for it. And we knew that we needed to that we could turn this into something great and into something lasting. We knew that we could turn this into something a lot bigger. We knew that we were going to need to go to Europe. We were going to need to go to Asia eventually. And we felt like bringing in the right partners would actually help mitigate that risk. And it would also give us kind of a stamp of approval so that we could continue to hire and bring in talent.
So I did, in my research on you, Stu, I read some testimonials from some of your past employees. So I'm going to embarrass you here on the big stage. One of your employees wrote that Stewart knows what forward means. As one of the captains of the Qualtrics ship, Stewart was constantly calling his crew to confidence and coaching them to reach their potential, even if a storm was on the horizon. Qualtrics' success has Stuart Orgill's fingerprints all over it. Talk to the students and share about your experience. How have you learned how to motivate your employees? You talk about this very flat organization, focusing on your customer, focusing on client success, but certainly you've probably had some experiences where you've had to really call them to task, to bring them, coach them along this journey. Maybe share with your experience in terms of motivating others at Qualtrics.
Yeah, I think everyone has their own way of doing it. I actually tried to always allow people to do things that they were interested in. Especially on the front end when we had like no one in any of the areas. I was always trying to find people, like one of my interview questions that I've always used that I think kind of catches people off guard is, I'll have the interview with them, I'm talking to them, you're trying to figure out trajectory in the interview, and then I'll always ask them, what's your God-given talent? What do you think you're better at than anyone else? And it's kind of the same question, if you think about it, that you get at, what are some of your strengths or whatnot. But asking it in that way, I think, catches people off guard a little bit, and they end up giving you a really authentic answer. And then from that authentic answer, I can see how I can match them up with the opportunities at Qualtrics, or if they're a fit, right? And I think leadership is actually about finding opportunity. That's what motivates people. People want opportunity. Think about like your best mentor, the best leaders that you've ever known. It's actually finding the opportunity in someone's life and then helping them to see that and helping them to see the path to get there. Whether it's personal growth, if you're coaching someone on an individual basis, you're trying to find the opportunity for them and direction. If you're trying to point them in a place that they're going to fail, that's not leadership, right? But if you can see the opportunity or direction there, that's what motivates people. Everyone wants to progress. Organizations want to progress. And so I think it's key to figure out, you've got to be able to figure out what people's strengths are. You've got to be able to figure out, where they can succeed and what direction they can go in. And I think that's the most motivating thing. The worst thing in the world, motivation-wise, is to put someone in a box that they just don't fit in and tell them it's just like, that's not going to help.
You're brilliant, and thank you for sharing that insight. Let's open it up to the students now for some questions. Questions for Stewart? Yes, please. Oh, we got a mic that's going around here. Just raise your hand and we'll get a mic to you.
Hi, Stuart. My name's Caleb. Nice to meet you.
Nice.
So Qualtrics, great company. Love you guys. You have competitors like SurveyMonkey, other competitors out there. What are you guys doing to stay on top of the industry?
So, it's a great question. It evolves over time, right? On the front end of things, we used to always say, we just ignore our competition completely and listen to our customers. And if we do what our customers want, and if we are constantly executing as a company, other people are going to have a really hard time keeping up. It is a very difficult thing to scale a business and have an incredible product. And it doesn't matter if you're in the restaurant business or anywhere else. If you can have a consistent experience that's really good for your customers, they're going to want more, and they're going to continue to want more and whatnot. That's one side of things. Then there's the whole strategic side of things, right? And that's kind of what resources does the company have that other people don't, and how can you differentiate yourself? And on the front end, it was a very simple product that you could do anything with. And it was very robust. And so we had thought leaders that were using our product and raving about it. And it was this grassroots kind of like growth of Qualtrics. And we chased everyone out of the DIY space pretty much. I mean, they all went kind of upstream. SurveyMonkey, we've always said, is like one of our best lead generators because SurveyMonkey's awesome. It's great. You're going to build a survey on it. But if you really want to do something professional and you've got a brand that you care about, at some point you want to make every interaction that you have with your customer match. And using SurveyMonkey probably isn't going to be that. And so then they're going to go to Qualtrics. Or at a certain point, you're going to hire someone that's doing something really sophisticated. And at a certain point, you're going to have to switch from a SurveyMonkey or someone like on the low end, and you're going to have to go to a more professional product, and that's us. Now, you just asked about that side. We kind of view ourselves as the middle, right? We're in the middle, and we think that's a really good space to be in because the easier we can make our product, the more we kind of move downstream, and then the easier we make our product, we also move upstream as well. And the good thing is that over all these years as we've grown, we haven't relied on people to scale the business. We've done kind of the hard work, which is actually developing the product. And as you develop a product to scale, that gives you more options later on. It might not seem like it because sometimes early on in a business, when you have the ability to do consulting and you could make a few more $1 million, you think, oh, that's an awesome, that's an awesome opportunity. But because we focus so much on making everything, building everything into the product, it's actually given us the ability to truly scale. And that's where we're at right now. I think out of all the companies out there, there are very few companies that really have the opportunity to be the system of record for every interaction that a business has with a customer, client, or the market. And I think we're in that spot. Is that easy to do? Is it easy to line that up? No. Worst case scenario, if it doesn't happen, do we still have a good business? We have an awesome business. Those 3 different areas, they're huge. Customer, employee, and market. If we did those individually, that'd be great. But because we spent the time on the product doing something hard, which was creating a very robust product that was easy to use, we have this incredible system or platform that potentially is being used in some companies as the system of record, but in the future could be that way for a lot of companies.
Great question, and you get insights in terms of why investors value Qualtrics at such a high level in terms of this enterprise solution, the ability to grow in their space. I saw another hand, your question.
My name is Brad Harding. I'm in the Masters of Human Resources program here. We've heard a lot about the war for talent for software developers, software engineers. What's your perspective on attracting talent to Qualtrics?
Yeah, there's so many different angles on that type of a question, right? Like startups, and early on, it's hard to get people to come, and you got to just take whatever you have, and you got to figure out if you're in the right spot. Sometimes going and fighting in an area where everyone else isn't the best place. Like if I were going to start a business today, I'd probably move to a market that no one else wanted to move to. Like I'd probably move to where I grew up, San Antonio or something like that. I'd go to a city that's just kind of off the radar, and that I can like pick the few people there and kind of have my pick, but be off the radar and not have to fight against everyone else in a big market. I think getting stamps of approval and whatnot is helpful as you grow a business. But back to the leadership standpoint, people are going to select a company where they have opportunity. And people can sense that. They can figure it out. People that are bright can. People, like you have to be able to figure out whether a company is good or not. If you're interviewing a senior candidate, that becomes the entire interview later on in life. A history of what they've done, right? It actually doesn't matter what they say very much. On the back end, it's kind of what companies have they chosen and why and how did they do there. And so good people in business or people that have great trajectories figure out how to read opportunity. And as a company, you just have to be creating opportunity for them, you know. I mean, if you don't really have opportunity and it's false and it's just kind of a bunch of you know, hype, people will figure it out. People will leave, you know, people are smart. Yeah, so you know, attracting, I think it's all about executing as a team. You know, another thing too is keeping the bar really high. There's been a lot of times when we've needed to hire people, but we've waited over time, like a lot of people. And it's really hard too as you grow, especially as you have these large interview loops, to do that and keep the bar high. I still interview every sales candidate that we hire in our Europe offices and our Sydney offices. And is that because no one else can interview? No. But it's to like bring my own insight to it. And you know, when you look at a candidate and you know that people are growing a business and you don't want to get in a team's way at all, like it's kind of hard to tell them that, look, this candidate's not very good and these are the reasons, but hopefully the team as a whole continues to learn and they get better and better and better, and hopefully someone else is doing that. I know other people are doing that, you know, on the front end of the interviews. So
I know a lot of our students are interested, Stu, in this global expansion of Qualtrics. I know a lot of our students have desires to work in international or global business. Maybe speak to some of the challenges and opportunities that might be theirs to expand their geographic reach beyond even the United States.
So at Qualtrics, every time we've opened a new office, we've sent a landing team. And the times that that's worked out the best is when the landing team has been very good at their job already. And so I think if you want an opportunity you can have any opportunity you want within a business if you're an A player. If you're a top performer and if you're doing what you like and you love and you're passionate about it, you can have any opportunity you want later on in the business. And if you're not, then I don't think you have as many opportunities. And I think if you want to be a part of something, that's always the case. If you look at anyone who has really impacted Qualtrics over the years, it's because they got really good at what they were doing and they knew that. And they knew exactly where their focus was. And so as we've continued to expand, we always have a landing team that goes in with the group where we've expanded, and I think that's super helpful. You need that in order to have continuity across offices. And then you need to do really well on those first hires, right? You need to, because they're basically building the business out. I think another thing that we've done is as we've expanded is as we train new people, especially on the front end, we would always send them back to the headquarter office to meet as many people as they could and to be a part of that culture for a few weeks and whatnot, and send them out. Let me see, other challenges. I think you got to be really careful to not just expand the way that everyone thinks that you should. When we went to Europe, everyone thought that we should start with an enterprise sales team, but we'd never done an enterprise sales team before, you know? And we didn't have the infrastructure that's needed to support an enterprise. And when I say enterprise, I mean like field sales type sales organization. And so we actually went the other route, which again took us a lot longer. We started in Dublin, and we started with an inside sales team. And the problem with an inside sales team is you're hiring people that don't have experience in sales, and you've got to grow them, which is more valuable in the long term because they know your business really well, and the ones that end up succeeding are going to probably be the leaders of the company, you know, in in the future years. But now we've come on top of that. Now we've like gone back to Europe, and we've started developing this enterprise sales team. But we actually have the infrastructure. And again, if we would have leapfrogged that and done that too quickly, those people that were coming in wouldn't have had the resources that they needed in order to, progress and move forward. So I think it was helpful. It took probably a little bit longer, but then the Sydney, Australia office has gone even faster. And we don't want foreign offices that are copying the United States. We want foreign offices that are pushing the United States, right? That, one sales deal is closed and then another sales deal is closed, and you're learning from Europe, and Europe's learning from the United States, and everyone's learning from APAC. And that's kind of the situation that we have with our offices right now. This summer, our Europe office closed the largest deal in the history of Qualtrics. At the end of the summer, that record was broken by the US office. And I hope it's broken again by someone, I hope that's constantly going back and forth between the offices.
As we've discussed here and in our prior discussions outside of this forum, I can really sense that you value transparency and authenticity. And those are some of the cultural values at Qualtrics. Maybe you can speak to how Qualtrics as a culture is transparent and authentic.
Yeah. So the reason that's so important when you're growing a business is everyone starts feeling like maybe they're not in every single conversation, or that they're minimized. And so if you can create a culture where everything is transparent, radically transparent, you can avoid a lot of those problems. We have a system internally that lists every single person's sales numbers on the sales side. So when someone's promoted, it's not a surprise. It's not like people got in this back room and decided who was going to be promoted. It's pretty easy to see why that person was promoted. In addition, we've always had these things that we call snippets that are used by a lot of different companies, but it's basically the 3 to 5 things that you're working on every week, and the 3 to 5 things that you got accomplished last week. And things like that, where anyone can take a look at what a leader is working on at any time within the business, or what someone is doing in a certain product area. I think a lot of times as humans, we just want to be able to know, if we want to, what's going on. After board meetings, we always have a complete debrief with the entire company. Even before we got our rounds of funding, our company knew 2 months in advance. But we told them not to tell anyone, and they didn't. And they kept it a secret. And I think people value being trusted. And as you're trusted within an organization, you're gonna do more. You're gonna be part of the mission. You're gonna be bought in. That's in anything. That's in your family. That's with your kids. People value being trusted and being spoken to like adults and human beings, and brought into the information. So it takes a lot of effort to do it as you grow. It takes effort to make sure that everyone has access to the data that they want. Does everyone read all of it now as we grow? We have 1,200 employees. No. Not everyone does, but the access is there. And if someone wants to, they can dig in. Another thing that it's helpful for is if you give access to everything within your business as you're growing, if you give access to, all of the data, players that are hired can actually make a difference within the organization because they have the tools that they need, and they aren't kind of hamstrung, and there's not these different silos of people that are kind of holding data hostage and whatnot through the organization.
Pretty good. Let's open it again to some other questions from our students.
Good morning. I've worked at a company where, or just an internship where my supervisor referenced the people at the 30,000 foot level and how they didn't really know what was going on inside the business. And so they made some poor decisions because they didn't know how, they didn't know the needs of the lower employees. So as a person that sits at the 30,000 foot level, or at least some people might see it that way, how do you maintain, and you spoke to this a little bit about interviewing people in your offices across the pond and things like that. What other things do you do to, as a leader, to stay in touch with kind of the lower level people, or not even lower level, but just maintaining an awareness of the needs of your company?
I think when you see people get detached from a business, they're not involved in the day-to-day, just the day-to-day of the business. They're not involved, and we do things where no one has an office within Qualtrics. Everyone sits out on a main floor. But I mean, you could even say that as a business grows, I think that's more symbolic. Because obviously not all 1,200 people can interact with each other every day, right? That's just logistically pretty difficult to do that. But I think to stay in touch, you've got to walk the floors. You've got to bump into people. You got to have individual, personal conversations. You got to be interested in what people are working on. You've got to have those types of events, and you got to ask questions. And you've got to have bright people, and then also assume that they're bright, and listen to them and build out the infrastructure that's needed in order to make things happen. And I think when you see someone that's detached from a business, it's probably because they're not plugged into the day-to-day, And at that point, someone can become a liability to a business if they're not plugged in.
Thank you. Other questions?
It's kind of like, I'm gonna go on top of it. It's kind of like with kids, right? If you want to teach your kids to work hard, you got to work hard too. There's no, you can't just in a family setting, you can't say I want my kids to be hard workers, but I'm gonna go vacation all the time. You've got to be out there working with them. It's you got to work yourself to death to make it so that they know what work is. I think that's the same thing within a business, to stay connected.
So you mentioned at the beginning that you saw yourself in an entrepreneurial setting. So why was that enticing to you? Why did that attract you, and what were the reasons, despite maybe going a corporate route or something like that?
Nice shirt, by the way, Nick.
Yeah, I like it.
Thanks.
I know, I should have brought some gear with me. So, I don't know, I've always wanted to do my own thing. I've always, I think everyone does. I used to always ask this question when I was in college. Anytime I met anyone that I felt like was somewhat successful, I would ask them, if you could do anything, let's say you had $50 million in the bank, what would you do? And I was so surprised to see how many people didn't like what they were doing. Just a ton of people out there, they're working in a job that they don't want to be doing, and they'd rather be doing something else. And I was also surprised to see how many people want to be entrepreneurs, but how many people really are. And I think there's a lot of people out there that want to do their own things, but it just, it's hard. I'd grown up in an entrepreneurial family, and the way that I looked at it, it was more secure to be an entrepreneur than someone in a corporate position, because I felt like my dad had 2,000 clients. He had to be fired by 2,000 people before he lost his job. And so I just always looked at it as more security. If you can actually create something that's valuable, that people want, you're always going to have a job. And that's just the way that I looked at it. But I think it also goes back to, what's the skill set that you were blessed with? I've got a friend that I hired to head our finance team. And he was the type of guy that when he was in elementary school, he was incredibly bright. His mom homeschooled him because there wasn't anyone that could teach him math. He was doing trigonometry in elementary school. And then he went on to be an electrical engineer. And then he went into finance a little bit. And now he works at Qualtrics, and he is a rock star at Qualtrics. And that was his skill set. And I knew that, but that's not my skill set. And the skill set that I had I felt, and the natural interest that I had kind of lent itself to organizing things or doing something entrepreneurial or leveraging kind of a team or building a team or something like that. So I thought about it all the time in high school. I used to think about business ideas. I used to like keep a journal on what I wanted to do. And I think it was probably more dreamer stuff than actually practical. But at the same time, like that's who I am. You know, that's just kind of what I always wanted to do. So I might have mentioned that, like I said, when this opportunity came along, I always had a different vision in my mind, but I think the blessing is that I was able to identify that it was a solid opportunity and that opportunities are scarce. And, you know, we've talked, Ryan's talked about this, I've talked about this here before. Better than being an entrepreneur, it's better to be an opportunist. You have a certain set. Everyone does. Everyone has skill sets and talents that they've been blessed with. And you have areas that you can impact the world. And knowing what those are is very valuable because then you can place that as a lens on any opportunity that comes your way and determine if it's a good fit. And that's what I felt like I had that. I knew exactly what I wanted to do. And when it didn't match up with my plan, and I saw that opportunity, like I was able to recognize that it was a good opportunity. And that's multifaceted too. I feel like there were just a lot of things that felt right at the time and everything else. But I don't know, just always kind of wanted to do that. I've always like skipped school. I've always, I've just like, that's who I am.
A couple more questions here.
When you were thinking about, you want to be an entrepreneur, and you mentioned how you're surprised that there are a lot of people that want to do that as well, but that don't. I would imagine it's because of a lot of fears that they have. And so when you were planning on starting your own thing and wanting to do that, did you have any fears that you had to really overcome that were big enough to make a mark on your memory, and how did you overcome those?
I think my greatest blessing is not realizing that I shouldn't be doing something, And if you look at it, was I the guy that invented Qualtrics? No, that was Scott. Was Ryan the guy that invented Qualtrics? No, that was Scott. You have different types of entrepreneurs. Sometimes there's like these really brilliant people that just naturally create great products, and there's a need, and they happen to start selling them, and I think that's one way. But I think there's other options as well, right? There's people that see the opportunity to grow something, or they see a product that they can expand. And I really don't think I've been so bullish on Qualtrics since the beginning. It's almost been a fault, But I've been really all in on it, and I've always thought it was a great company. Now, I didn't do it completely blindly. I've always been sort of kind of like an interviewer where I'm constantly asking people questions. And I was constantly evaluating Qualtrics and seeing what type of opportunity it was. And all of my friends that worked in consulting or a banking type role or people that I'd met, I'd ask them about it. I'd talk to them and interview them about different questions and just ask them, lots of things. And everyone was always interested in that. And so I could feel that I could tell that there was like a lot of momentum there, and that it made sense and it was a good idea. You can figure that out as you're talking through your idea with people. You can kind of figure out, oh yeah, great idea, or like, are they asking you more questions about it? And so I think we can all vet ideas or opportunities that we're doing. It's not just like sheer grit. I had this guy come to me once, and he had a business idea, and he talked about for like the first 20 minutes how much he hates his current boss and his current company and where he's at. Then he told me about this idea, and I was like, I think people are already doing that right now. And he was like, no, I want to do this, and he was really excited to do it. but then like at the end I said, I think you basically just want to leave your current situation. I think that's the issue. And, that was like feedback from me to him, and he didn't end up doing the idea. And I think he could tell, he probably vetted it with a couple people, that it wasn't a good idea,
Back there. Let's go back here in the back, and then we'll come here at the front. Dallin.
Hi, my name is Dallin Smith. You've talked a lot about our God-given talents, and I was wondering still if you could kind of explain what the ideal Qualtrics employee would look like and the qualities of your top performers. And then also, it's kind of a loaded question, but what we could do now to start developing those qualities.
I think that in general, that's, it's a very personal, like, journey, right? And part of your experience is you don't even know what all your talents are right now. You don't even know of all the areas that you can help people and succeed in. And you'll figure those out as you go through and as you have places to work at. One thing about Qualtrics that's amazing is in a business where it's growing fast, it really does allow you to kind of stretch and grow and figure out some of those things. It's kind of like a gym, right? Where you get to kind of determine who you are. Top performing people, it depends where they're at, right? A leader has to get good at hiring people and has to get good at running a team, and developing people and developing talent within their group. They have to be able to manage people. Someone that we'd hire today, and I probably wouldn't be hired today at Qualtrics. Ryan probably wouldn't either. But if we were to apply, just because, hopefully you get better and better after every single hire. But the people at Qualtrics that do the best are the ones who decide that they want to, And there was a lecture that was given, or a talk or something like that, by the guy who runs the Navy SEALs program, I think, at UT. Some of you guys have probably read it before. And he basically said that they'd done all this research on what makes a Navy SEAL. Like, how can you predict who will make a Navy SEAL? And they've tried to figure out if there's a physical correlation, if there's an intellectual correlation. And in the end, what they figured out are the people that want it the most are the ones that end up getting it. And so you take that same lesson within business and you say everyone in this room has a unique set of talents or a different set of things. And you're not everyone's going to succeed at the same thing, but we all have like our own ways that we can develop, and it's something that we have to figure out over time, and we have to figure out how we impact things. And I think that's like, I think it's probably one of the most exciting journeys within life to figure out what you really want to do, and I think it's one of the most fulfilling things. And I think if it's done in the right way, that it ends up blessing a lot of people's lives, in the long run. So, I don't know, that's probably, that work, or want to drill deeper on that?
Yeah, so what would you recommend that we do now?
If you didn't hear that, it was, what can you do now? What can we do now as students?
I think figure out things that you really think you want to do, and then go after them. Like, make a plan and start going after them. If there's something that's on your mind right now that you really want to check out and you really want to get to, start going after it. What are you doing this summer about it? What are you doing to try and get there? Like, start trying to go there. You might realize you're not very good at it, or that like you're better at something else. But I think it's just moving forward and trying things. Like, go for it. If you really think you're good at something, like, try and figure out how you can do it. And I think you'll learn a lot about yourself. That doesn't mean you have to quit everything. Sometimes people think that like being an entrepreneur, or let's take like being a musician, like that's a very, stereotypical one. Like you don't have to quit your job to be a musician. Like say that that's something that you've always wanted to do. You could figure out how to do that and try that while you're doing your current job or schooling. You don't have to throw everything away. You can keep another foot in, but just try it out. Start developing it. That's how we develop ourselves. That's how we develop our talents. Same thing at a business. If you want to do something or you're interested in an area, let someone know. If you're interested in leading or doing something international, tell someone. I think that's the biggest thing. Lots of people, they never get to places in their career because they've never told anyone that that's what they're interested in. And so no one knows to be looking out for them. When I was interviewing this one guy named Tim Palis, when he first came in, I said, what do you want to do? And he said, I'd really like to run a sales team or do sales in Asia eventually, because I went on an LDS mission to Taiwan and I speak Chinese. And we laid out a path for him to do that. And guess who was on the landing team in Australia? Tim Palis. And guess who's been able to sell in Chinese? Tim Palis, right? And there was another guy named Jordan Plater, and the same thing. And guess who met with Dee Dee Kwai when we were meeting with them a few months ago? It was Jordan Plater, and he did an awesome demo in Chinese, and I didn't understand much of it, but it was totally cool. But he'd kind of surfaced that. So no matter where you are, I've got a sister-in-law that's working at a company, and she wants to be an editor. And as she's told people that she wants to be an editor, more and more opportunities have just kind of surfaced. So figure out what you want to do, and then start trying to do it. Make an action plan. What are you going to do this summer? What are you doing this? Are you trying it out? I wanted to do something entrepreneurial. I always had a project going. I was starting a club, or I was just trying to do something. They weren't all successful. Half of them were horrible. But I was keeping, you got to try.
For the students and as a marketing professor, having that aspirational brand, but then publicizing that, promoting that through your LinkedIn, right? I love students that will take their LinkedIn profile beyond just the current to where show their trajectory, where they want to go, so that others can help rally and support you along the way. We had a question up here at front.
I've got one other thing on that too. I wasn't very good at just getting the best grades in schools. But people want to help you more than you realize. And so I always had this strategy about how I would get A's, because I wasn't always going to get there just from my own work. So I'd go in the professor, and I would actually, I had two different angles, but basically it was putting the ball in their court for how I could get an A and asking them to help. And there are so many professors that would help me. And I feel like I actually got a lot of my grades. I went to UTSA for a while. I went to BYU, but there were a lot of times when professors gave me kind of an edge or helped me get there, because I said, look, I really want to get an A in your class. This is where I'm at. How can I get an A? And people want to pull for you. That's in any aspect of life, whether you're a student, whether you're in the business aspect, a career, whatever. People are pulling for you, and they want to solve problems. They want to help you. Okay.
So, tell me about your experience at Qualtrics, making the first few sales and acquiring the first few clients.
On the front end, we were just always trying to, make people think that we were bigger than we were, because we were in a basement, and you're trying to hide that. In fact, there was this one guy that called in once, and he's like, "Where are you guys located?" And I said, "In Provo." And he's like, "Where?" And I'm like, and he's like, "At 1361 Lakeview Drive." I'm like, "That's our mailing address," And anyway, I was like, "Yeah, we're in a basement, actually," But we were constantly on the front end, trying to make it happen, I mean, you were closing deals, you're filling out RFPs, and these RFPs are just off the charts, and you've got to do things to make them work. You've got to stretch and figure out how to fulfill the requirements. I mean, I remember one company, it was a financial company that we were doing, and they had all these requirements of servers and whatnot, and we just, in order to do that, we had to kind of like line up things in a data storage facility to move out to if we got that deal, so that we could do all those requirements. And you know, I mean, you're creating your own slides. You know, it's just amazing that people bet on you on the front end of things. But we did. We had a lot of people a lot of universities that bet on us, a lot of companies that did bet on us on the front end. But yeah, it's like it's hard work, and you get through it, and eventually you scale past a certain point. Anyone that's on the front end, the best thing that you can ever do is to get brands that you can then just go out and sell, right? More important than anything else in a sales position or role is you want to get your initial brands that you can then go publicize with everyone else. You want to get on the phone and say, so-and-so, so-and-so, and so-and-so use us, you know, to give other people confidence. And then I think that's what and we didn't have a problem doing that because Ryan was phenomenal at doing that. That is like where he completely shines. He was able to grab a lot of the key brands early on. I grabbed a lot of key brands early on, and then together we had a massive list. And by the time we had 20 employees, we had a customer list that, and you know, also the product was just helpful and it could be used on the grassroots level, but like we had a customer list that was pretty impressive, you know, and I think helped us propel into later on. But it's tough, like having people take a bet on you early on.
We have time for maybe one more question for the students. While you're thinking about that question, let me just provide as a segue, as Stewart shared about sales coming up at 11:15 in Huntsman Hall 226. We have a sales skills for every career. This is a panel of recent alumni graduates here at the Huntsman School that have launched careers in sales, including those in Qualtrics.
Yeah, we've got a Qualtrics guy.
And AT&T, Hendrickson Butler, and Workday, and some other phenomenal representatives here, and Vivint. So please join us in Huntsman Hall 226 at about 11:15. I gave you some time to think about your last question. Let me ask a question, because I know our students are maybe eager to know this. Now, looking reflectively back when you were in school, what were some things that you wish you would have known then that you now know?
I don't know. I think this is always a hard question because it's kind of, it's like, you know, your set of experiences has made you who you are. And so I think it's always difficult to figure out what, because you'd always, you know, if you knew what you know now and you went back and you had to do something, hopefully you'd be better. Maybe you wouldn't do any better at it at all. But I think the thing that would be the best would to be able to have the confidence in myself, just to know that it's okay. It's okay to do what I was doing that, you know, wasn't conventional, because it was going to turn out okay, right? I think that would be helpful. If I could give like my former self something else, I just probably give myself a pat on the back and tell myself to keep going, right? And I think probably that's the case for a lot of people in a lot of businesses. Like, you can make an impact, you can do it. There's like, people are amazing, yeah.
Perfect. On behalf of the students and our faculty and our administration, let's thank Stuart Orgill for being with us today.